Rahil Siddiqui. A name etched in sorrow, a life brimming with promise tragically cut short. Born with a thirst for knowledge, Rahil devoured books like oxygen, history, philosophy, science. His curiosity knew no bounds. Rahil excelled in school, his intelligence a beacon. Teachers marveled at his insights, his classmates drawn to his quiet charisma. He wasn't just smart, he possessed a depth of empathy that drew people in. But beneath the surface of the brilliant student, a different kind of yearning stirred. A yearning for purpose, for a life lived beyond the confines of academia. This yearning led him to the Marines. Driven by a sense of duty and a desire to serve his country, he took a leap of faith, trading his textbooks for combat boots, his pen for a rifle. The clang of metal, the bark of orders, the acrid smell of gunpowder. Rahil's world transformed overnight from the quiet hum of the library to the jarring symphony of military training. Paris Island, the crucible where recruits are molded into Marines. Every day a relentless assault on the senses, pushing individuals to their physical and mental limits. He excelled in his studies, absorbing tactical knowledge with the same fervor he once reserved for philosophy. His physical prowess, however, lagged behind. He pushed himself relentlessly, determined to meet the Marines' exacting standards. Each successful push-up, each obstacle overcome, fueled his determination, but it also masked a growing internal struggle. Paris Island was a pressure cooker, designed to transform young civilians into hardened soldiers. Rahil, accustomed to the world of ideas and intellectual debate, struggled to adapt to this new reality. The relentless discipline, the emphasis on physicality over intellect, it all felt jarringly discordant with his nature. He wrote letters home, pouring his heart onto the page, his words a mix of determination and quiet despair. He spoke of the grueling days, the nights haunted by the echoes of gunfire, the constant fear of failure. His letters, however, remained unanswered. Rahil, starved for a sympathetic ear, found himself increasingly isolated. The support system he desperately needed, the understanding that could have made all the difference, remained tragically out of reach. The pressure continued to mount. Sleep deprivation gnawed at the edges of Rahil's sanity. The world blurred into a dizzying kaleidoscope of commands and drills. He started making mistakes, small at first, but enough to attract the attention of the drill instructors. The reprimands were swift and brutal, further eroding his already fragile confidence. Shame and self-doubt gnawed at him. One particularly brutal training exercise proved to be a tipping point. After a sleepless night and a day of relentless physical exertion, Rahil faltered during a combat simulation. He froze, his rifle shaking in his hands, his mind a whirlwind of panic. That night, Rahil broke down, his body racked with sobs, his mind teetering on the precipice. The cracks in Rahil's facade were becoming impossible to ignore. His bubbly personality, once the heart of any gathering, had dimmed. He was withdrawn, his gaze distant, a haunted look in his eyes. His bunkmates, hardened by the rigors of training, mostly dismissed his behavior as weakness. Toughen up, they'd say, unaware of the storm raging within him. One night, unable to bear the weight of his despair any longer, Rahil reached out. He confided in a fellow recruit, whispering his fears and anxieties, his voice cracking with desperation. His words, however, fell on deaf ears. Fearful of appearing weak, his fellow recruit turned away from Rahil's cries for help, leaving him alone to grapple with his demons. The days that followed were a blur of despair for Rahil. The betrayal of his confidant, the continued lack of support from his superiors, the crushing weight of his own perceived inadequacy, it all became too much to bear. He wrote one final letter home, a heart-wrenching plea for understanding, a desperate cry for help. He poured his soul onto the page, his words filled with a sense of utter hopelessness. This letter, like the others, never reached its intended recipient. Rahil, stripped of his voice, his spirit broken, retreated further into himself. The light that had once burned so brightly within him now flickered precariously. The end, when it came, was swift and brutal. One bleak morning, Rahil was found lifeless in his barracks. A single gunshot wound a tragic period to his short life. The news sent shockwaves through the training camp, a chilling reminder of the unseen struggles that plagued some of their own. An investigation was launched, a formality in the eyes of many. The official report cited personal reasons as the cause of death, a sterile phrase that did little to explain the tragedy. His family, devastated, grappled with the news. The letters they received after his death painted a haunting picture of his final days. Rahil's story serves as a stark reminder of the hidden casualties of war, the unseen scars that many soldiers carry long after the battle is over. Rahil's story serves as a painful reminder that the battlefield is not the only place where soldiers fight for their lives. The invisible wounds of war post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, anxiety, can be just as debilitating, just as deadly as any physical injury. The military often fails to adequately address the psychological toll of combat training and deployment. The stigma surrounding mental health issues within the ranks prevents many soldiers from seeking the help they desperately need. This culture of silence has devastating consequences. Rahil's story is a clarion call for change. It is a demand for a system that values the mental well-being of its soldiers as much as their physical prowess. We must honor Rahil's memory and the memory of all those who have fallen victim to the hidden wounds of war by demanding better mental health care for our servicemen and women. We must break the stigma surrounding mental health, creating an environment where soldiers feel comfortable seeking help without fear of judgment or reprisal. Increased funding for mental health resources within the military is crucial. Recruiting and training more mental health professionals, reducing the stigma associated with seeking help, and creating confidential channels for soldiers to report their struggles without fear of retribution are all essential steps. We must also support organizations dedicated to helping veterans struggling with PTSD, depression, and other invisible wounds of war. Rahil's story is a tragedy, but it can also be a catalyst for change. His sacrifice must not be in vain. We owe it to him, to all those who have served and sacrificed, to create a world where their mental well-being is valued, supported, and prioritized. The journey towards ensuring the mental well-being of our soldiers is ongoing. It requires a collective effort, a commitment from our leaders, our communities, and ourselves to prioritize mental health and provide unwavering support to those who serve our nation. We must advocate for policies that prioritize mental health screenings, increase funding for veterans' mental health programs, and promote research into the causes and treatments of PTSD and other mental health conditions prevalent among veterans. By fostering open dialogues about mental health, challenging the stigma associated with seeking help, and promoting awareness about the invisible wounds of war, we can create a more supportive and understanding environment for our veterans. Let Rahil's story be a call to action, a reminder that the strength of our military lies not only in the might of its weapons, but also in the well-being of its soldiers. Let us honor his memory by working together to ensure that no other family has to endure the pain of losing a loved one to the shadows that often follow the battlefield. Let us strive to create a future where our soldiers receive the care and support they deserve, both in and out of uniform.